Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Morning Stylo News Intelligence Update for July 1st, 2026. I'm your host. Today, we're delivering a structured, strictly factual explainer on some absolutely critical developments in the space domain from just the past 2 weeks. We're going to examine the rapidly shifting dynamics of global space operations, looking objectively at the facts, both on the ground and up in orbit, to really understand this current era of aerospace competition. Now, before we get too deep into the facts, I want to quickly acknowledge our sponsor, ProWave AI. They're the brilliant developers behind Stylo Intel Ops, which is an AI-powered open-source intelligence platform, and Stylo News, their commercial platform, available on the web and mobile apps. All the insights and data we're looking at today are derived directly from their intelligence aggregation. All right, let's look at the docket for this morning. We've got 4 main areas to cover. First, we'll run through a global space situation report. Second, we'll examine commercial launches and infrastructure. Then we'll break down the impacts and decision makers. And finally, we'll wrap up with public sentiment and our future outlook. Let's jump right in. Section 1, Global Space Situation Report, Operational and Strategic Pacing. To really ground this intelligence geographically, it helps to look at where these aerospace events are actually unfolding. Over in Eurasia, state actor operations are heavily concentrated around established launch centers. But contrast that with the Pacific. Down there, we're seeing allied commercial launch facilities really stepping up, like the Rocket Lab complex on the Mahia Peninsula in New Zealand. It's an interesting dynamic, right? You've got the traditional state-driven complexes of the East operating at the exact same time as these geographically dispersed, commercially augmented networks of the West. So, what are these states actually doing? Well, the intelligence points to 2 very distinct profiles. On one hand, Russia is creating more immediate operational disruptions. We've seen a pretty notable uptick in GNSS, that's Global Navigation Satellite System, jamming and spoofing over Europe. This localized interference creates real everyday hurdles for commercial aviation, shipping logistics, and allied operations that rely on satellite timing. On the other hand, China represents a long-term strategic pacing element. The data shows a highly accelerated launch tempo. They just hit their 43rd orbital launch of the year. Plus, tracking networks recently confirmed a Chinese reusable spaceplane released an uncharacterized object into orbit. It's a clear demonstration of their expanding capacity for on-orbit experimentation and dual-use infrastructure. Section 2, Commercial Launches and Infrastructure, Capacity and Strain. The commercial sector is just relentlessly expanding right now. SpaceX is maintaining a really dominant launch cadence with its Falcon 9 system, consistently executing successful booster landings. Recent operations include Starlink satellite deployments, the Transporter 14 anniversary mission, and preparations for their upcoming Starfall demonstrations. The strategic goal here, as articulated by their leadership, is clear market dominance, rapid innovation in reusable technology, and building out the actual infrastructure we're going to need for broader orbital and Martian connectivity. But we're also tracking some major tactical responsiveness from Rocket Lab. Following their 10th consecutive successful Electron launch from New Zealand, they completed the Victus Haze mission. Now, check out this turnaround time, under 17 hours. Think about that. That is literally less time than a commercial flight from New York to Singapore. This operation directly fulfills U.S. Space Force requirements for rapid, tactical satellite deployment, proving for sure that allied commercial providers can meet incredibly strict military operational deadlines. However, this unprecedented launch cadence comes at a physical cost, and that cost looks a lot like this number, $1 billion. A recent audit by the NASA Office of Inspector General identified a $1 billion deficit required just to repair aging, critical infrastructure at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. You see, systems that were originally designed for infrequent legacy launches are now getting severely stressed by the sheer volume of commercial flights and the massive scale of modern rockets. Section 3, Impacts and Decision Makers, the Cascading Effects. The impacts of these events naturally cascade across 3 distinct levels. Locally, it's a dual effect. New Zealand's economy gets a nice boost from this rapid launch agility, while Florida's Space Coast faces operational vulnerabilities due to strained electrical and wastewater grids. Nationally, the U.S. is confronting the absolute immediate need for infrastructure modernization to maintain its launch capacity, whereas China is locked in on national strategic goals, securing lunar resources like helium-3 and water ice. Internationally, this creates a pretty complex environment. We're witnessing a divergence between open multinational cooperation models proposed by some states and the strategic, commercial alliance models driven by the U.S. Artemis program. To really understand these different strategic courses, we just need to look at the statements of the actors themselves. Right after the successful launch of their Chang'e-10 rocket and the sea recovery of a crewed spacecraft at Wenchang, the Chinese Space Agency's perspective was crystal clear. They stated they are prioritizing lunar exploration for strategic resource acquisition and technological leadership. They're aiming for manned lunar landings by 2030 through steady progress and multinational participation. Domestically, the U.S. approach is highly decentralized. It's a synthesis of commercial and federal action. SpaceX continues to leverage its massive launch cadence to pursue internet and infrastructure dominance. NASA, meanwhile, is pragmatically adapting its Artemis 3 mission profile. Based on current technological readiness, they've shifted focus toward low Earth orbit docking tests, prioritizing safety while they continue lunar lander development. And over in Congress, figures like U.S. Representative Mike Herod-Apollos are actively seeking funding and legislative adjustments so NASA can accept commercial contributions for those vital spaceport repairs. Section 4. Sentiment and Future Outlook. The Public Pulse. Analyzing recent open-source social media sentiment, the data reveals a public that is deeply fascinated by private sector engineering. A full 60% of the conversation is highly positive, mostly driven by SpaceX's reusability records, successful booster landings, and future market potential. Another 30% of the discourse is neutral to positive, factual tracking of Artemis 2 training and lunar mission milestones. The remaining 10% just represents mild curiosity regarding general astronomical events. The big takeaway? Overall public sentiment heavily favors commercial innovation and economic momentum over geopolitical anxieties. Based on current intelligence, here's what you should have on your Horizon watch list. In the coming days, watch for Starship pre-launch testing and pad readiness down at Boca Chica, Texas. Looking months ahead, we'll monitor the ongoing proximity operations and training for the Artemis 2 crewed mission. And looking years into the future, the timeline points toward NASA's Artemis 3 low Earth orbit tests late in the decade, running right in parallel to China's stated goal of a crewed lunar landing by 2030. We'll conclude this morning's briefing with a central, objective question that remains totally unresolved by current data. As aerospace technology achieves unprecedented reusability and launch frequency, how will ground-based global spaceport modernization secure the funding and engineering required to keep pace with an accelerating commercial launch cadence? It's a friction point between ambition and physical reality that will absolutely define the next decade of space operations. And that concludes our explainer for this morning. Thank you so much for listening to this Stylo News Intelligence Update. To dive deeper into these events, you can download the full audio explainer on your favorite channel. And for clean, AI-powered open-source news on demand, we invite you to subscribe and track global intelligence instantly at stylonews.com. Have a great day.